Paramore, this is it. Album review. Let's chat about it. Hey, friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Paramore, Tennessee-based pop-punk emo legends. You know them. A lot of people love them. You know the band. You know where they've been. Fronted by Miss Hayley Williams. I'm going to be perfectly honest right off the bat. Paramore, you know, when they were on top of the world, was never like my favorite band. They weren't a band that really excited me that much. And before you just shut the video off right there, you know, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys. Around the time that Paramore started breaking through and, you know, really piercing the mainstream, if you will, I was way out of my pop-punk phase, and their debut, All We Know Is Falling, it just didn't excite me enough to get me back into the genres. I did certainly get the appeal, though. I understood why people were up in arms over the band and the album, and their follow-up album, Riot, as well. I kind of was in the same mindset. I mean, I truly do appreciate the singles. Crush, Crush, Crush has landed on a few of my cardio playlists, and I'm totally fine with that. But overall, it just wasn't an album that excited me at the end of the day. I do appreciate it for what it is, though, and I understand why people flocked to the band immediately after. But for the next few years and their next few releases, honestly it just became more and more evident to me that Paramore was just not a band that I was overly excited about. Brand new me, like, jeez, this album bored me to tears. Like, even when I tried re-listening to it like a week or two ago, I just couldn't do it. Sorry. But Color Me shook. Around the time of their self-titled debut album, slowly but surely, I became, you know, a lot more interested into what the band was doing. They were trying out a lot of new things. They were experimenting, which was something I didn't expect for a band that already had a sound that people loved so much, and they're now, 4 or 5 albums into their career. I thought a lot of the new wave and indie pop influences on this album were really good, though. It wasn't perfect, but it had me looking in their direction. It seemed to me like a fresh, new start for the band. Now, I'm gonna drop a bomb on y'all, and a lot of purists are not going to like it. But After Laughter is my favorite thing that Paramore has ever done. By far. This was a dance pop album that had a lot of roots in the 80s, but it is immaculately produced. It's just so bubbly and colorful and fun and catchy. I mean, for a guy like me that was never that crazy about their early work, hearing them go in this incredibly vast, very different direction was just what I wanted to hear. Now, it's been, you know, quite a few years since we've heard from Paramore last, and, you know, leading up to this album, I've been a fan of what Hayley Williams has been doing as a solo artist. Her debut album, I gave a very positive review to, and leading up to this thing, I didn't really know what to expect just because they've certainly been switching their sound up quite a bit the last few years. And this album is no different, as apparent by the lead singles from this album that showed the band going in a post-punk revival and sort of dance punk direction. And honestly, overall, it's not a bad album. The title track, This Is Why, I've enjoyed this thing since it dropped as a single. This is a sharp, tense, dance punk inspired track with a fantastic riff that does a really great job of touching down on both personal and very political topics. But they do it really well. This track is done with so much justice. It's quirky, like I said, it has a fantastic riff to it. It's tense. Hayley's performance here is great. She's got so much personality on this track. Not only that, but they all just seem like they're totally comfortable in doing this style of music, which is something that I was kind of worried about. I, for one, am just really happy that we're living in a time where Paramore has just, I don't know, the want and the ability to experiment and try new things as they see fit. Because honestly, I think it pays off. The news is really good too, even though honestly, as a single, it took a little while to grow on me. I do enjoy it a lot now, but at the time, I didn't really know what I thought about it when it dropped. This track is much more off the rails, much more winding. It's a lot more upbeat. It's a lot less groove-oriented too, but man, every time this chorus comes around, I am just shocked by how big it is. It is explosive. The energy here is commendable. My hat is off to it. But I have to say, once again, and I do hate to say it, Paramore purists, I don't know how you're going to feel about a lot of this album. You may love it, or you may absolutely hate it. This is far from pop punk, but I certainly am grooving at the moment. Running Out of Time, on the other hand, takes things back in a very strong groove-oriented direction. It's very artsy. It's very tight. But Haley does a really great job of commanding this performance. Like, I love her little freakouts that we get every time this chorus rolls around. That is just fantastic, which, may I add, the chorus is so simple, it's so effective. But the duality here, the quiet, very tense verses and this explosive, very in-your-face chorus is done really well. C'est Comme Ça is also really great, and I have to take a second to point out there's a lot of really sharp, very tense dance punk riffs on this album. They are, for the most part, done really well. And once again, there is personality here in spades. Haley sounds completely in charge. Her performance is equal parts really tense and almost dangerous at points, but also really cutting and vulnerable and emotional, personal as well. It's short and it's sweet, but it's incredibly memorable and it packs a punch. Now, obviously, this is a big leap for Paramore. And overall, as far as an album goes, I think there's not a lot of bad things about it. It's actually pretty solid overall. I just wish they sharpened things up a little bit because this is a big leap in sound. Like Big Man, Little Dignity, this is a tough one in my book. I actually really like the very determined riff that we get on this track. I think it's really sharp, but I don't know, the dreamy, sort of hazy production that we get on this track, it really kind of gets things out of sync, and it's something that we hear later on in the album that's done really well, but for now it sounds a little sloppy. And it's a shame because lyrically this is really focused and poignant and very, very current. I don't know though, for the moment this breezy sort of dreamy post-punk revival is just not hitting it that hard with me. It's just such a sharply written track, and I wish that they tightened things up a little bit. That's just me though, you may like it, but Figure 8 though is, I think, the worst track here. And it's a shame because it's one of the most colorful, airy, and fun-sounding tracks from a distance. But it's also one of the most disconnected tracks here, and I hope that it's just me. I hope that you guys enjoy it more than me. Like, the jagged riff is great, but Haley's performance on this track, this is easily her most underwhelming vocals and just performance overall on this entire album. It just ends up being really awkward by the end of it, and that's a shame. And Liar is one of the most stripped down and meditative tracks here, which I don't have a problem with, but here I have the exact opposite issues. Haley's performance, it's one of her most determined and focused on this entire project. It's silky smooth, it's tender, it's incredibly heartfelt too. But to me, there is even more of a disconnect on this track. The instrumental just seems totally out of sync with Haley. But it doesn't sound like a Paramore song, or at least not a very good one. It honestly sounds like an underwhelming track from either her solo album or the EP she dropped shortly after. Outside of that, though, this project's very solid, and I'm happy with where Paramore is right now. You First is a tightly wound, completely off the rails sounding track. It's where I love to hear it. It's got a hell of a lot of urgency to it. It's punchy. It's in your face. Haley sounds so direct here. I'd even go as far as to say this is the most punk sounding track here. But that's not to say that they don't drop the ball in other elements here. It's really well produced. It's really well performed. The writing is on point. It's very current. These are feelings that I feel many people share with Haley. And the performances all around are just so passionate, and I can't say no to it. Crave is also freaking fantastic. It's still very rooted in post-punk revival and dance punk, but at the same time, compared to other earlier tracks here, the very dreamy, very hazy approach to it seems very unique and just, I don't know, something different. And on top of that, every time this chorus gets around, it may be the best one here. Even the production on this track is flawless. As far as the deep cut goes, look no further. And as far as a stripped down track goes, I think Thick Skull as a finale may be the best track here. I love the hazy production. I love the lapping instrumental that ends up coming off really hypnotizing. And it picks up nicely into a sort of throwback 90s alternative rock ballad that would have had a great home on the radio. The instrumental is one of the more epic ones we get here. Haley's performance is booming. This is the epic finale that this album deserved, and I'm happy with it. Yeah, overall, this new post-punk revival and dance punk direction from Paramore is pretty darn good overall. They sound like they're very comfortable with it. Yes, yes, I wish that there were some moments that they tightened things up a little bit. Their ideas did get a little sloppy from time to time, but we are living in an age where Paramore are actually pretty fearless right now. They feel that they can experiment and try something new on a whim and actually feel pretty comfortable doing it, and I, for one, really appreciate that. It makes me happy. They're in a good spot, and I'm happy to hear that. I'm feeling a light 7 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.